Thank you. Welcome to the session on future of higher education of the future in this year's Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum for Sustainable Development. The future of higher education has long been on the table of discussion in many gatherings, and much has been said about this topic. Most of the discussions, however, have been conducted on the assumption that the future is at least a few years away. And that is what is normally expected of any discussion of the future. In 2020, however, the global pandemic has shocked us into the realization that the future has arrived and that much of the preparations we have been making for the future need immediate implementation. Today's session will focus on the impact of COVID, especially on the issue of connectivity. How, in the age of pandemic, can we connect physically and virtually? How disruptive is the disruptive technology we are forced to adapt in this age of the pandemic? How can we engage with society and industry under such conditions? And looking into the farther future, how can we make higher education sustainable? To talk about these topics, we have invited 5 speakers, and I will just briefly introduce them. And this session will be conducted we have already made some recordings. So we will show you some recordings, and in those live sessions, we will invite the speakers to speak, and we will be moving from one topic to another very quickly. And then after all the presentations have been made, we will move immediately into a Q&A session. And we have already accepted some questions beforehand, and we'll be addressing these questions to the presenters. So now, let me introduce you to the speakers. First, we have Professor Jun Ho, and he's from Yonsei University, and he's a specialist. Although his specialization is in civil engineering, he's now a specialist in disruptive technology. Next, we have Professor Travis Lovett, professor of Harvard University, and he specializes in civic engagement. And from the University of Bordeaux, we have Professor Joanne Pages, Vice President of Internationalization. And our 4th speaker is Min Song, again, professor of Yonsei University, specializing in information science. And finally, from COICA, Korea International Cooperation Agency, we have Vice President Jae-shin Park, who will be speaking about the efforts of COICA in ASEAN countries. So without further ado, let's look at our first presentation.
My name is Jun Hyo, a professor at Yonsei University. It is an honor to give an opening talk of this session, Future of Higher Education, Higher Education of the Future. The title of my talk is The Accelerated Disruption of Universities, Outlook and Challenges. I would like to start my talk with mentioning the legacy of Yonsei University. The first international symposium of higher education was held in Korea, right here at Yonsei University, 49 years ago, in 1972. The foreword of the proceedings tells that the innovation of higher education is demanded by rapidly changing society. The trend towards innovation in higher education is growing phenomenally all over the world. Is it a deja vu? With recognizing the legacy of Yonsei University, let me start introducing the content of my talk. I'll start with the meaning of COVID-19, how it shapes up our society, then what kind of changes around higher education are expected. In order to deal with such mega trend of changes, I present my opinions regarding what we have to do, which is selective digital transformation, and related 6 action items. What's the meaning of COVID-19 to our society? there have been numerous arguments how COVID-19 have been changing and will change the world. I think it can be summarized into two keywords. The first is acceleration. The well-known adage, the future is already here, it's not just evenly distributed, should be changed to the future is already here and is rapidly distributed due to COVID-19. Change is and will be accelerated. The second keyword is divide. Social divide, class divide, digital divide are often mentioned in mass media. The concept of divide will be applied to change itself. Things will be changed and things won't be changed. The following are my list of major changes around higher education, which are characterized by the two keywords, acceleration and divide. The first noticeable change of higher education, at least in Korea, is decrease of college entrance rate. Although it is not a worldwide trend, it is clearly observed in Korea. Why this is happening? It is mainly due to economic class divide. While capital power dominates everywhere, academic elitism often fails. In other words, higher education is not as valuable as before. The next trend, increase of online courses, which are omnipresent. Not to mention the frenzy of MOOC. Major universities have offered more and more online courses. For example, California State University and California community colleges together present 10,000 online courses as of 2019. University of Illinois made a bold move to convert its MBA program into online. No more offline MBA program at UIUC. Professor Clayton Christensen, who's famous for coining the terms disruptive innovation, publicly asked a question, can you commoditize professors? Moreover, he applied his disruptive innovation theory to higher education, and he claimed that the disruptive technology is online courses. In his book, Innovative Universities. I'm currently running a MOOC on Coursera entitled Spatial Data Science and Applications. You can see the drastic hiccup of the learners of my MOOC after outbreak of COVID-19. It is another example of the accelerated change, the increase of online courses and its popularity. The potential online courses were envisioned by Alvin Toffler in his book, The Third Wave, published in 1980, 40 years ago. He described the concept of personalized learning, as you can see. In fact, the increase of online course itself is not the disruptive change of higher education. Instead, data generated from online courses will make a game changer in the near future. I'll get to the point a little later. While online courses are everywhere after COVID-19, it is noticed that new perception of university becomes widespread. For example, students and their parents realize that coursework for degree award, considered as the essence of university in the past, would grant only a marginal value now, in comparison with other activities offered by university. At the same time, the authority of professorship is inevitably downtown. Divide seems to become a hot issue after COVID-19. In fact, divide itself was just unevenly distributed future in higher education. A paper published in Science 2015 evidenced that the wealthy neighborhood made more use of MOOC, even though MOOC was claimed as a vehicle of democratization of higher education. Digital divide, or education divide, was already noticed before COVID-19. It is just being accelerated now. The divide is applied to universities as well. Prominent thought leaders always insist that a large portion of colleges and universities will disappear in 2020s in the turmoil of changes. And it was already materialized in 2019 from liberal art college in the US. Another issue in higher education would be a threat of big name IT companies, such as Google, Apple, Microsoft, and so on. What will be the next big thing for such top-tier IT companies? How do they keep growing to satisfy shareholders? Education must be their plan of expansion. Why? Because it's humongous size of business. As the table shows, as of year 2015, the education market size was $5,888 billion. Higher education only in the US was $623 billion, which is larger than annual budget of Korean government. What if Google and Harvard collaborate and offer well-designed online courses to the world? It could be a formidable threat to other nominal universities. Now let us discuss how universities should react in the wave of such changes and threats. My answer to the question is selective digital transformation. The example of selective digital transformation is K-pop band BTS concert, for example, which was held in June last year. Music itself is not changed. However, other parts of the concert business has been changed. Likewise, universities should define what should not be changed and what should be changed, and quickly adopt new technology for the transformation. The strategy for individual universities to overcome such a transformational period will be case by case. The following is the overall action item for undergraduate teaching universities, from my opinion. Philosophy, the first, is about consensus of why universities should make a painful transformation. The university community has a variety of stakeholders who has different interests. So it is extremely difficult to get the consensus. However, for that, the keywords of the philosophy should be student success, student benefit, even a step forward to student obsession. They are the objectives of educational institution. However, universities, particularly research-oriented universities, including Yonsei University, often forget or ignore the categorical imperatives. Based on the consensus, I believe quick adoption of online learning would be the next step. However, the transformation should be carefully designed and conducted. For example, creative and collaborative subjects are not good candidates for online courses. Instead, receptive subject or basic principles would be well replaced by online learning, in which even better student achievement can be expected. As mentioned, simple conversion from offline to online during outbreak of COVID-19 is not digital transformation. When student achievement of online courses outperform offline courses, the digital transformation can be achieved. The true value of online course is data sets that students generate from online learning activities. And the data should be utilized for personalized learning and adaptive learning with prescriptive analysis of individual students. The learning contents through the transformation should be redesigned as well in order to foster three traits of future talent, which are diversity, connecting, and resilience. The future talent must be equipped with foundational knowledge, such as literacy, numeracy, data literacy, and connecting capabilities such as communication, collaboration, convergence, and resilience such as adaptability, persistency, leadership, and social awareness. It means that universities should offer not only specialized and vocational learning, but also integrated learning. The problem is that regular coursework, no matter whether it is online or offline, could not hardly raise connecting capability and resilience, though it could grow foundational knowledge. That's why design of extracurricular activities matters in the transformational process. For brick and mortar university, I believe the key performance index would be how much campus is utilized for student activities. It is kind of controversial statement in the era of digital transformation, but while external online learning contents become abundant everywhere, the value proposition of traditional university is the physical presence, where students live together, work together, learn together, experience together, and even create together. The last but not the least, we should be aware that all the transformation efforts require big financial support. Unfortunately, most governments, including Korea, are very stingy for higher education. European universities undoubtedly led the academic world in the past, but the crown disappeared after World War II. The major reason was lack of finance to offer higher quality education to increase the number of college students. Particularly the top-tier universities taking initiative of the transformation have no choice but to cooperate with big-name companies to fuel the transformation. However, there's no free lunch, then the decision should be made sooner than later regarding what we can give away and what we cannot give away. As a concluding remark, it is widely accepted that universities are on the verge of a transformation, and the trend is being accelerated. Who will survive or disappear will be realized in a few years in many countries. I just hope my talk would be helpful a little bit for university management teams to work on the transformation now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hall. Next up will be a presentation from Professor Travis Lovett of Harvard University, and he'll be talking about civic engagement in the time of COVID.
Good afternoon, and thank you to my colleague, Dr. In-Han Song, the Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment at Yonsei University, and the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens for providing me with the opportunity to speak with you today. The global pandemic has challenged our institutions in so many ways, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share what I've learned over the past several months in hopes of helping others to find innovative and creative ways to serve our global community. My role at Harvard is to create a thriving ecosystem and culture for civic engagement. At Harvard College's Center for Public Service and Engaged Scholarship, we strive for every student to find their public purpose and causes greater than themselves. Social distancing is counterintuitive to every instinct we have as humans, especially in times of adversity. Connections are so vital to our shared work. And this past year has challenged us all to think about who we are, what we value, and what kind of society we want to create. Whether it's responding to a global health pandemic or rooting out systemic racism, our mission to educate students to become active citizens and future leaders has never been more urgent. At our center, we aim to help our students to find causes greater than themselves, to be agents of hope and healing, and to find meaningful ways to help our neighbors and serve community needs. On March 13th, 2020, we sent over 90% of our students back home. At the time, it was a controversial and unpopular decision. It took us almost 8 weeks to regroup, but our team was committed to finding a way to adapt and reimagine our programming in a remote environment. On May 8th, we launched a program called Harvard Serves Everywhere, an online platform that connects students with community service projects around the world. We reached out to community partners and the Harvard alumni community to encourage them to share volunteer opportunities with us. Through this platform, students are organizing voter registration drives, conducting census outreach, developing curriculum and lesson plans with teachers, organizing advocacy campaigns for human rights and social justice issues, providing translation services, and supporting social media-based mutual aid networks to meet the needs of their neighbors. Through those initial efforts, we had over 400 students sign up for virtual volunteer opportunities over the last 6 months. Harvard Serves Everywhere sparked 2 ideas for the fall semester: Harvard College Everywhere and a completely virtual global day of service. Harvard College Everywhere has created opportunities for students to stay connected with the Harvard College community from anywhere in the world across a variety of disciplines, including health and wellness, arts, athletics, residential life, and public service. This program is intended to help our students who might be struggling with social isolation. Our ability to keep students connected is critical to their mental health and well-being. To stay true to our mission, we have looked for several ways to bring the Harvard community together. Every year, we organize a day of service to welcome our first-year students to their new home. The last day of service we organized in person for the class of 2023 was such a leap forward for our center. we had over 1,540 incoming students, or about 92% of our first year class, working with 64 local service sites. We saw a significant increase in student interest in all of our programs as the result of our planning for the first year day of service. In response to the pandemic and seeing the success of our virtual volunteer program, Harvard Serves Everywhere, we decided to create a global day of service in September 2020 as a way to engage students from all 4 class years along with our alumni, who were also seeking ways to engage the public globally. Our limitations due to the COVID-19 pandemic actually challenged us to come up with a more creative and expansive framework for our program. Most service days are performative by nature. Students typically clean up parks, prepare classroom spaces for the school year, or work with a local food bank or recycling center. But our reframing our first year day of service to work remotely gave us the opportunity to make the day substantially more informative. This year, through the Global Day of Service, we offered students 3 introductory training sessions on persuasive writing, orienting students to leadership styles, and engaging in advocacy work. We also hosted an information session about our department's 3 major focus areas: academic engagement, student leadership development, and professional development. We concluded the day of service with a community-wide discussion on racial equity work, which was led by our faculty director, Dr. Julie Rubin. These conversations oriented students to our department's work, but it also gave us an opportunity to promote social justice work focused on inclusion and belonging. Focusing on the types of projects we offered through our Global Day of Service, we had 3 initial concepts in mind: organizing voter registration drives, supporting our government's census outreach efforts, and supporting online learning and curriculum development in partnership with public school systems. Through conversations with our student leaders and community partners, several additional projects emerged, including reviewing and developing an eco-justice course curriculum with our colleagues at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, providing immigration and asylum resources through our partnership with immigrationhelp.org, creating a resource library across all 50 states for victims of domestic violence, and working on cause marketing campaigns to help the International Red Cross recruit volunteers for disaster recovery and community resiliency planning. Our students live in over 15 time zones, so we also wanted to develop projects that could operate asynchronously. These projects included working with Muckrock to provide public records requests and gain access to prison system records, identifying and cataloging infrastructure development through geographic information systems with MapSwipe, transcribing letters and historic documents with the Smithsonian Transcription Center and New York Public Library, and a team of students worked with our campus UNICEF Club in developing a fundraiser to provide humanitarian aid for children around the world. Our Global Day of Service was ultimately smaller in scope than our previous in-person efforts, but we were able to engage over 850 students and alumni to work in conjunction with 31 partner programs. This helped us to accomplish 3 goals: sustaining student interest and cultivating a lifelong engagement in civic issues, reinforcing Harvard's mission by helping students to figure out how to use their gifts and talents to better serve others and causes greater than themselves, and finally, orienting students to our department and the vast range of resources we provide in relation to volunteerism, leadership development, engaged scholarships, and pathways to careers in public service. Developing pathways to work in government, nonprofits, and NGOs is a critical focus for our center. We work with our community partners to sustain over 450 summer internship projects during summer 2020. During most summers, we typically sponsor about 500 students to work at sites focused on public health, education, legal services, environmental work, housing, journalism, political advocacy, and social innovation. From March 13th until the end of May of last year, we were able to restructure about 80% of our summer internship assignments. In instances where summer partnerships fell through, we were able to provide additional funding to students who developed their own summer project ideas. Through these efforts, students worked with our community partners organizations on research and technical projects, communication support, social media outreach, fundraising, and providing remote services to constituents. To help our graduates find public service jobs, we organized a public service recruiting day in October, where students and employers could meet one another through a series of Zoom interviews. It is typically much easier for our students to find private sector jobs, as corporate partners often come to campus to recruit. We wanted to create a system similar for our public sector employers, but it's costly to sponsor travel for nonprofits and NGOs to come to campus. Using Zoom, we were able to develop a way for outstanding nonprofits and NGOs to interview our students for entry-level jobs on a similar time frame to when our corporate partners typically come to campus. We had 14 participating employers this year and expect to offer similar programs like this in the future. We utilize our global alumni network to help our students find internship and job opportunities. We have also organized mentoring programs between students and alums. Over the past few months, we've created an online database for students and alumni to connect. We use an online software platform called Firsthand, which provides students and alums with an easy way to connect. Both groups create profiles, and students have the opportunity to seek out resume help or career advice from alumni that they reach out to. They can schedule 30-minute advising sessions with alums. We work with our Office of Career Services to promote this program, and so far we have over 150 alumni who have signed up to advise students. This is a program we're continuing to expand in the coming months. For several years, we've worked to organize nonprofit board recruitment fairs in cities across the United States. This typically provides hundreds of alumni from both the private and public sector with an opportunity to help nonprofits and NGOs with management strategy, communications, and fundraising support. Later this spring, we will work to offer a virtual nonprofit board recruitment fair in partnership with our Alumni Association. In case anyone might be interested in our upcoming programming, on Saturday, February 6th, we are organizing our 10th annual Public Interested Conference featuring Van Jones of CNN and Reform Alliance. Van will be talking about his work at the intersections of environmental justice, racial justice, and economic justice. At Public Interested, students meet our alumni and learn about a variety of public service fields and jobs. It's a natural place for students to meet professionals, but it's also a great way for our alumni to stay engaged with one another. At this year's conference, we'll be utilizing a web-based tool called Padlet to capture notes, questions, and ideas from our conference participants. On April 8th and 9th, we are hosting a virtual scholarship and social justice research conference. The purpose of this multi-school conference is for undergraduate researchers to connect on issues focused on public health, education, political engagement, racial justice, immigration, and a variety of other topics impacting underrepresented and marginalized groups. This year's keynote speaker, Dr. Roberto Gonzalez, leads a newly formed immigration initiative at Harvard, a university-wide effort aimed at advancing and promoting interdisciplinary scholarship and intellectual exchange around issues of immigration policy and immigrant communities. I've been so inspired by the resiliency of our staff, students, community partners, and university partners around the world to stay focused on how we help our neighbors and serve community needs. I hope these efforts inspire you as well. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me at any time. My email address is tlovett, T-L-O-V-E-T-T, at fas.harvard.edu. And you can also find us on the web at publicservice.fas.harvard.edu. Thanks again to Han, my colleagues for sharing about the future of higher education, and Yonsei University for hosting the Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum. From our institution to yours, we wish you a peaceful, healthy, and safe year ahead. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Lovett. And moving from America to Europe, we invite Professor Joanne Pages of the University of Bordeaux. She is joining us live, and she will give us a live presentation on Europe's response to the future. Professor Pages?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Su. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. Very good. So thank you, Professor Su, and to the Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment at Yonsei for inviting me to join you from Bordeaux in France. I'm delighted to be able to take part in this session. In fact, I'm going to focus this short talk on sustainability skills and international education. But don't worry, I will be looking at the way in which COVID-19 is impacting this. But in particular, I will join Professor Hu in saying that really what's happening is it's accelerating something that was already happening in the approach to international education. And in particular, in the way in which we think about the articulation between virtual, blended, and physical mobility. And I don't know if you can see me on the screen, but for mobility, I'm going to use inverted commas, because I think this is really the fundamental shift that I will briefly talk about. I'm also going to set this in the context of the European University Alliance in Light, which is a project, a network that my university is involved in with Ghent and many other, and 7 other universities in Europe, because this network is really aiming to be transformative of higher education by building in sustainability skills in education and research with innovative international education. But I'll come to that briefly as an example of where we could be going with this in the future. But perhaps if we can move to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So even before the current COVID situation, there has been increasing discussion in international education of the need for a rethink, in particular in the context of the complex societal challenges that we face today. For many people working in higher education, internationalization means moving a small proportion of excellent students around the world. And this is a good thing in many ways, and we should continue to try and do this, but we can not help but wonder what the impact of this is in really pushing a wider agenda for sustainability in education for the widest group of students and young people. So if we look at this slide, I'm just going to focus very briefly on what we mean by sustainability education and how international education can articulate with that. First of all, global engagement. And I think we can all say that we can see that international education contributes strongly to global education engagement. This is explicit in SDG 4.7, and it's really about developing, this inclusive, wider understanding of cultural diversity for responsible and reflective citizens. We can see how international experience can help students gain these skills. Secondly, for sustainability, we have a wider set of skills which are really related to challenge-based problem-solving approaches that bring students to engage with complexity. And this is very much related to pedagogical design and learning design and the way in which we approach education. Again, if we move students, if we bring them into contact with different ways of working, we can imagine that we're going to tap into this wider set of sustainability skills. Finally, and I've left it at the end, although it is something that is probably the first way that we think about sustainability education, we have deep disciplinary knowledge and expertise based on the most recent research results to help us really address these 21st century challenges related to sustainability. And again, if students are moving to different institutions, they have the opportunity, and that's often what we say in international education, to meet with the most recent research results and very dynamic researchers in different contexts around the world. So it's not surprising or original to say that when we look at sustainability and international education, it's very much what you learn, how you learn it, and also who you are learning with. Okay, and I think this is a very important point. Now, I'm going to step aside from this and go into a little example from last year. In June last year, a small group of Ban Ki-moon Global Citizen Scholars were planned to come to Bordeaux for a France-Africa summit. Unfortunately, this could not happen. Many things happened last year and many things had to be cancelled. So the students were invited to attend a summer school, a short program that was shifted to online and was transformed into virtual classes and sessions where the students worked collaboratively on real-world problems in online projects with local students and researchers from a range of disciplines across health, economics, statistics, epidemiology. And after the course, they were able to benefit from mentoring and to keep in contact with the group to develop their personal projects. So from what must have been a really clear disappointment, this became a rich international learning experience. Not the same type of experience, but through the tasks, the interaction, the collaborative reflection on what they did when they were together, it became a rich intercultural learning experience. Now, just now, Professor Hu talked about the value proposition of campus education. For me, this is the value proposition of international education, and it's often obscured by the simple idea that we move students around. With the shift to virtual international education online, there has to be a very explicit adaptation. It's not dependent upon mobility so much, but upon learning design and very explicit integration of these learning gains into the design of what you do in virtual online education. So it's not about the tools that you're using, but about bringing a diverse group of students together, how they work together, and how they reflect on that experience. And this is really very interesting because when we look at virtual international education, we have removed the mobility element and we are much more likely to put our attention onto how learning design contributes to developing these intercultural, global engagement, sustainability skills, which are part of a rich international learning environment. Now, obviously, we were very pleased to have this success story with the small Africa and COVID-19 summer school. This is a small project, but this is happening in universities across the world in an effort to save international education. But it's really also forcing us to think about the fundamental added value of international education and to make that added value more explicit. And I think that this will have a positive impact because it's helping us to have a much more integrated, inclusive approach to international education so that we might move from the semester year-long mobility, which will still stay, it's still very important, to collaborative educational projects embedded in curricula and international perspectives that come into learning and teaching across the curriculum at different moments through education for different groups of students who may never move, and why would they? So this is a very interesting movement in higher education, but it was already there. You may have heard of internationalization at home or internationalization at the curriculum. COVID has moved this up the agenda, and what I think is happening, and I think this is a good thing, is that the virtual online education is now being much more widely taken up in university policy, and that can only be accelerated now. Again, I'm saying that it's not a replacement or a threat to mobility, but an extension of international experience. And I think this reframing will be very positive. Okay, so with this idea in mind, I'd like to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to talk about scale up, and I'm going to use the example of Enlight, which is a European alliance funded by Erasmus+, a network of 9 universities coming together. Before the pandemic, we developed this project to develop close multi-level collaboration across the network to address 5 societal challenges. And look at the next slide again. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, sorry, previous slide. I think there's a lag. Thank you. So the aim of Enlight is to address 5 societal challenges, challenges related to sustainable development, health, digital, climate change, energy, equity, and doing this to really develop new learning formats adapted to these problems in urban cities, communities, with, by working on developing partnerships with many different societal stakeholders, associations, local authorities, local businesses across the 9 cities and universities. So from the start with Enlight, there was a focus on the disciplinary expertise, on the sustainability skills, and the global engagement. So really the holistic approach to sustainability education through international education. So what does this mean in practice? We go to the next slide, please. Okay, so in practice, this means that we are trying to scale up access to international education across a network of 9 institutions. This is quite a complicated ask. It means that we have to learn to work together very closely, and we have a long-term ambition for this project. Fundamentally, it means that we will develop international programs, so programs which have very flexible learning pathways, which encourage transdisciplinarity with very mixed student groups. And we will focus on modalities such as living labs, the short programs like the one I described earlier, which really develop these transversal, complex problem-solving skills. In parallel, we will be developing internationalized education within our campuses, across the campus. And how will we do that? And this is by having online and blended proposition with students engaging in virtual exchange, working on the materials in problem-solving context with each other in real environments, but other students in their programs using those resources to exchange at a distance and work together through virtual exchange. So this stepping stone mobility creates a kind of continuum from the simple fact to connect with another class in class-to-class exchange and exchange on projects and work that's going on, to complete programs and master's programs which will address these challenges. Before COVID, this stepping stone mobility idea is very much present in the project, but what we can see now is happening is that there is a much wider acceptance of how we can connect online through virtual collaboration, a much wider acceptance within the institutions. Students are more relaxed about working in collaboration. And within this project, we're going to do a lot of work on teacher development and looking at how people collaborate. Again, that we will use these really important tools, but we will look very much at the human-machine interface. We will focus on the human collaboration around that interface. And this will hopefully, and I think it will, allow us to engage many students in international experience, and not just the students who come to university seeking to move or seeking an international experience. So we hope to encourage people who would not have had the chance to discuss with students from the other side of Europe, but also from the other side of the world, because in our project, there is a strong focus on global outreach, and we hope to be working with the Ban Ki-moon Center on this part of global outreach, and with many other universities across the world to develop international experience for our students. So I'm just going to focus, if we could pass to the next slide, please. Now, I won't say much more about Enlight. Enlight is a very ambitious project, and the educational aspect is just one part of it. And really, this slide really points to the ambition and the complexity of what we're trying to achieve. I think it is achievable. What we will be doing is trying to give opportunities for more students to participate in international education through first experiences virtually and then physical experiences. And we will be looking at what are the competencies that they develop, and what kind of framework can we develop for what it takes for students to develop sustainability skills. I think I'll leave it there now. This is a brief talk. I would be really delighted to share about the Enlight network. I think it's got a lot of opportunities, so please do not hesitate to contact me by mail. My slides will be shared after the session, but also to look at this and how it's being accelerated in the context of COVID, this continuum across international learning experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pages. Next up, we have Professor Min Song Min, who will be talking about Yonsei's own attempts to overcome the future. And we have been preparing this for some time now, but COVID is upon us, and we have accelerated the implementation. So to speak about YEdNet, which is a name that we might change in the future, Professor Song, we have a pre-recorded video.
I am Min Song, a director of Y-Ethne Steering Committee at Yonsei University. Today, I'd like to introduce Yonsei Knowledge Sharing Platform to you. In this talk, I will brief you on how Yonsei responded to recent and urgent online learning demands in higher education, which was stimulated by the COVID-19 pandemic. First, let me give you an overview of Yonsei University. As you may well know, Yonsei is the #1 private university in Korea and one of the top universities in Asia. About 38,000 students are enrolled at Yonsei, including 4,300 international students. We have about 5,000 faculty members. As of 2017, Yonsei published more than 5,600 international journal and conference publications and generated more than $363 million research expenditures. COVID-19 has made a profound impact on our daily lives. University is no exception. Sudden hit by COVID-19 early 2020, Yonsei had to manage unplanned online course offer. The reality was that we had almost 8,000 classes to be converted into online in a very short period. And the capacity of YSEC, which is a Yonsei learning management system, was extremely limited. Only 30 to 50 classes were allowed for video lectures. Back then, we had only 2 studios and 8 camcorders. For the safety concern of the Yonsei community, reliable operation for on-tech and online education were not possible at all with YSEC. As a leading university for research and education, Yonsei has a vivid task for overcoming this turmoil and even goes beyond this and take this as an opportunity to move forward. We plan to create a knowledge-sharing platform. With resources and high-quality manpower at Yonsei, this new platform fulfills our mission to educate students to be a global leader, as well as anyone who needs continuing education for their future career path. Together with top IT companies like Google, Kakao, Naver, Yonsei develops the next generation of the education platform, which allows for uniquely positioning as a provider for top quality education. In developing the knowledge sharing platform, we have 3 major goals. First, we develop a flexible, open, integrated learning management system that supports online, offline, and blending classes. Second, we launch online education platform where Yonsei University takes the lead in sharing knowledge by connecting Yonsei University with foreign and domestic universities, companies, and the society. Third, we facilitate provision of degree and non-degree programs to fulfill the university's social responsibility while generating revenue. To accomplish these goals, we plan them in 3 stages. In short term, until end of 2021, we make the platform on and offline campus by stabilizing the operation of our platform, competing on and off-campus content, and certifying online Korean language. In midterm, until 2023, we make it to be the Korea's leading educational platform by forming a consortium for the domestic universities and generating revenue. In long term, until 2025, we make it to be a global platform that competes with other global platforms such as Coursera and edX, and offers online master and doctoral degree. Yonsei knowledge sharing platform plays a pivotal role for stakeholders and entities to maximally benefit from higher education. For internal members, Yonsei faculty members are major players for providing content. For them, the platform helps plan content, protect copyrights, and share revenue. Yonsei students are major consumers of those contents. For them, the platform provides outstanding online and non-face-to-face education environment. And it also provides and allows students to feedback on contents and co-generate contents with instructors. For external members, IT companies are the major developers for technology, for IT in new education. And the platform invests resources, plans, and promotes commercialization. For external learners, foreign students and non-degree program students and alumni are the main target. For them, the platform provides content and certifies degree and professional skills. This new platform is differentiated from existing LMS, which is YSEC, in many ways. Platform-wise, the new platform is cloud-based, responsive mobile app, interconnected to other administrative systems at Yonsei, smoothly connecting to real-time video lecture server. Those are notable difference from the previous system. Content-wise, degree and non-degree programs are offered. Python-based online code runner is built in. High video quality and profit generating and sharing are enabled. As you see on this slide, the platform provides 4 different programs, including degree program, profession program, open program, and the international program. Please be noted that the design of the platform is not still finalized. The development of the platform goes as planned. The initialization, analysis, and design phase were done in middle of November 2020. The main implementation, including migration from the existing system to the new platform, will be finished by end of this week. LMS portion of the platform will be officially available on February 8th, 2021. In addition to degree programs, the platform covers international programs and open courses. For international programs, 2 example programs are SDG-related courses, such as Understanding Sustainable Development with Ban Ki-moon, and COVID-19 related courses, such as COVID-19, Global Impact, and Korea's Perspective. For open courses, we plan to offer paid, free, and pre-course classes. Additionally, we plan to create joint courses by inviting leading scholars and instructors from other domestic and international universities. In addition, we plan to offer more paid and free public courses and open courses. One good example of putting a lot of efforts on creating high-quality online content is Yonsei Korean Language Institute. With the popularity of K-pop and increasing interest in Korean culture, there are more than 2,000 Korean language institutes with 100,000 students over the world. At the same time, there are 23.6 million foreign employees in Korea in 2019. Realizing this opportunity and overcoming decrease in enrollment due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Yonsei Korean Language Institute is an active player on the platform to create Korean language courses aided by AR and VR tools. I'd like to wrap up my talk by sharing challenges and future direction of higher education in association with the new platform. One important issue is engagement of faculty members. We cannot automatically assume that faculty is willing to participate in providing high quality contents for the platform. There must be an incentive mechanism that motivates faculty to do so. This leads to a question of sustainability of the platform from the content perspective. From the technological perspective, challenges are how scalable the system should be, and can the platform be maintained on 24/7 basis. More importantly, how can we make the platform attractive to current and potential students? This question is also related to the role of students. Are students only passive learners? Can they be a co-creator of the content? Since Yonsei pursues an open and shared platform for domestic and international universities, the question that we have is how can all participating universities co-grow within the platform? Also, what is the ideal model for partnership with other global learning platforms such as Coursera and edX? Finally, we strive to make the platform as flexible, as adaptive as possible so that we can properly manage the new demands driven by future technology and educational needs. To this end, we plan to incorporate precision-based personalized guidance to students by analyzing their learning patterns and behavior. Yonsei has diligently responded to the current challenges with the new knowledge-sharing platform, and we will successfully complete our mission as a one Yonsei community. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Song. Actually, next Monday is the day when this YEdNet will be open to Yonsei University stakeholders, and none of us have actually seen this, so we're expecting we're actually half in terror and half in expectation, expecting the coming of Monday. Thank you. Our final speaker is Vice President Park Jae-shin of KOICA, who will be talking about KOICA's activities, especially as they relate to higher education in developing countries. Vice President Park, welcome.
Thank you, moderator, Professor Sir, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to introduce KOICA's higher education program in ASEAN developing countries today in this prestigious GEEF 2021. I'm afraid my talk does not fit with the guidance of the moderator, the issues of connectivity in the pandemic situation. And also it didn't fit with the theme of this session, the future of higher education or higher education of the future. If I could summarize the theme of my talk in one sentence, it could be the higher education is the future in some developing countries. We've until heard that leading universities in developed countries like Yonsei universities, Purdue universities, and Harvard universities are seeking to figure out what the higher education would look like and should be doing in the era of post-COVID-19 and the fourth industrial revolution. But in many countries that are underdeveloped or even developing, the higher education is yet something to introduce or to make functioning its role in substance. A good part is that many developing countries, if not all, are recognizing the necessity and importance and even urgency of fostering the high quality manpower in their journey to a more prosperous future. And I believe that it's not even necessary to argue that the higher education is at the core of nurturing the competitive manpower. Yesterday also, I read an article saying that, quote unquote, the higher education is considered as one of the most important factors affecting human capital in the human development approach. Consequently, COICA's developing partner countries among ASEAN are no exceptionally setting the high quality manpower development as one of the key strategies in their national social economic development plans. Next slide, please. For example, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam had set their 10-year socio-economic development strategy 2011 to 2020 in order to achieve $3,200 US GDP per capita and to enter into a modernized industrial state. They intend to do so by means of establishing market economic system, expanding infrastructure, and nurturing high quality manpower. The emphasis on human resource development is being reiterated in every plan or strategy for development, as seen here as an example in the Economic Policy Framework Initiative for Vision 2035, formulated in 2018. Next slide, please. We can see the same emphasis on human development in other ASEAN developing countries as well. Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Philippines are all focusing on nurturing human manpower through higher education, especially in the field of STEM and ICT. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay. No, previous one. Thank you. Reflecting this demand of our partner countries and in order to share higher education practices of Korean leading universities, COICA had launched the Higher Education for a Prosperous Future initiative. It was identified as part of the government's new Southern Policy aligned ODA plan, therefore toward ASEAN ODA partner countries, the countries mentioned in the previous slide. Through this initiative, COICA intends to support partner countries to improve their higher education policies, systems, and curriculums. We invited Korean universities as implementing partners in an open contest mode. We made compulsory that proposing institutions should include in their proposals a plan to support for master's and doctoral degrees of beneficiary academic institutions, faculty members, and also create creative ways to support for R&D and local startups in order to facilitate the knowledge transfer toward graduates, researchers, and the local community. Next slide, please. As a result of several rounds of competition for proposing institutions to demonstrate their commitment and the efficacy of their proposal, 7 projects were finally selected in 2019. The budget for those shortlists were requested to and granted by the government and the National Assembly in 2020 last year. And the project will be launched this year as the first year of 5, 6, 8, or 10-year project duration, respectively. As you see in here, 4 projects can be categorized as the agriculture field. 2 projects are engineering related, and 1 is the medicine area. Looking at the beneficiary countries, There were 3 projects in Vietnam, 2 in Indonesia, 1 in Cambodia and Philippines, respectively. Unfortunately, there was no project formulated for Myanmar and Laos. As you may know, the Yonsei University is also participating in one of these projects. The third one, the Education and Research Empowerment for University of Medicine and Pharmacy at Ho Chi Minh City for the project duration 2021 to 2025. Well, the project size is fairly large, $9.68 billion by the College of Medicine Yonsei University. Congratulations, and hope to see the effective and sustainable outcome and impact to be realized. Next, please. Well, now the conclusion. Until recently, COICA's development cooperation in the field of education focused on vocational skills, intending to establish leading TVET institutions, technical vocational education and training. We are proud of the fact that in many partner countries, the TVET institutions that we established and supported are producing quality and skilled technical manpower and being considered as the model and prestigious institutions. COICA will continue to support the efforts of enlarging the base of productive personnel with knowledge and skills of those countries. At the same time, we recognize that there is a high demand for higher education because they clearly understand that the future prosperity comes not from natural resources they have, like oil, gas, or minerals, but from knowledge, creativity, and commitment of their people. Korea ourselves have a successful experience of higher education being supported and developing further on that basis in 1950s and 60s. The United States University of Minnesota project is well known. Through the Minnesota project, the Seoul National University could substantially upgrade their education and research capability in medicine, agriculture, and engineering. It must have also had a great impact on Korea's industrial development in those fields. Now, Korea has grown to be the 12th largest economy in the world in terms of nominal GDP in 2019, and projected to be the 10th in 2020 last year. It became one of the 7 countries in the 30-50 club. Every year, thousands of medical staffs from around the world are visiting Korea to learn the medical expertise. Korea and COICA wish the similar leap forward are happening in our development partner countries as well. Upon having conversations with government officials or citizens of the developing partner countries, it seems to me that the single word that they like most is leapfrogging. They understand that the difference in terms of economy and social development is not easy to narrow down in a day, in a month, in a year, but they realize that they don't need to follow all the steps we came through. They become to have hope for a better future than today in that way. No doubt that higher education, specifically in the areas of STEM, ICT, medicine, and agriculture, can contribute as an enabler toward the future prosperity. In other words, in those countries, higher education is the future, and all the good wishes and good luck to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Park. Our viewers might have realized that we've been going at a breakneck pace, and we've hardly had any introductions even, or saying hellos. And this is because we wanted to get as much time as possible for mutual discussion. Because most of the presentations do have a central theme, and even Vice President Park's talk about COICA does indeed revolve around these issues. So I think we'll move now at a slower pace. We do have plenty of time. And we'll be eating into some of the loose time between the end of our session and the gala, which will happen at 6 o'clock. So there is about just over 30 minutes for us. And I think this is right, because we do have a lot to talk about. let me reintroduce you to our participants. Unfortunately, Professor Travis Lovett, time over there being, very, very late at night, he could not join us. Professor Pages of the University of Bordeaux, it's early morning there, so thank you for, agreeing to rise up so early and join us. And, the Yonsei participants are with me, and Professor and Vice President Park, Dr. Park, is probably in his office in Koika. So we have a general question that I would like for you to talk about whenever a question is addressed to you. You can talk about this in addition to the question that is addressed to you. And the general question is this: how do you make virtual connections as effective as physical connections? And a lot of our presentations have been dealing with this issue. And this is a very important limitation that we have to overcome. So this is a question that I would like for you to keep in mind. When I sent you a note, I asked you to be brief about this, but I think you could sort of, breathe more slowly when you answer these questions. And the first set of questions are directed to Professor Ha and Song, and the other participants can join us, if you wish. And the question is this: online platforms for long-distance education have clear limitations. For now, and because we're not yet in the future. So what are these limitations, and how do we overcome them? I would like for at least the participants from Yonsei University to focus on issues like testing. How do we make these testing fair? Our assessment of student work fair. How do we tackle the issue of laboratory work if it's a long-distance education? What about education that involves physical exertion, like phys ed, or music, or even among the arts? Well, art, and especially sculpture. So how do we tackle such areas? This is a question that I would like for our two professors of Yonsei to talk about, but I'm sure that our other participants might want to offer their opinions. Beginning with Professor Ha.
So, my answer to the question, simply, so online learning, online course, is not panacea to handle all the problems that we are facing right now. However, I think online learning or online technology can be cut out for certain types of learning, particularly receptive learning, or for basic principles. Like as I briefly mentioned in my presentation, certain basic principles can be pretty much replaced by online learning. However, still, I do not fully believe that the online learning itself is not really 100% replacement of like face-to-face learning. But there are some rooms and potential that online learning can reach the level of offline learning, that the potential comes from data itself, data which is generated from online learning activities. For example, every single mouse click on like education platform and their learning style and the way of they answer the questions and level of knowledge for each part of body of knowledges can provide us, like as an educator, how effectively and efficiently provide them with different paths of learning, for example. We call it like adaptive learning, for example, as umbrella terms of personalized learning. For that, I believe there's some potential that we can reach to the level of offline learning. So in my presentation, I mentioned that data on the slide where that adaptive learning platform was introduced. So we have a long way to go. How we can utilize, make the best use of data set which were generated by students, and then take into consideration to improve online learning. And eventually, I believe, not right now, but maybe in the near future, that online learning can be as good as offline learning while we then hone our understanding of the data set and analytics from descriptive, predictive, and even prescriptive analytics, which means that we can guide our student with better ways of learning. Then eventually we can reach to the almost the same level of offline learning. And while I'm listening to Professor Pajel's presentation, it was really enlightening talk about your initiative of Enlight. I really appreciate and I really enjoy your presentation. I thought before listening to your presentation, like collaborative learning. For collaborative learning, online activity or online approach wouldn't be a solution. But while I'm listening to your presentation, there's some potential and possibility that we can make the use of online activity, online approach to improve collaborative learning. So I believe this is why we get together on virtual and discuss about what you have and what we are planning to do. And it was really, insightful, and one of the way we have to, go for, future learning in higher education.
I totally agree. It was very enlightening, and I would like to hear from you, Professor Pajes, after we hear from Professor Song, because it is something that seems to tie the three presentations together. Professor Song?
Yeah, I think it's not easy question, and answer is also not easy. I think let me give you my opinion on this. It has nothing to do with technological advancement. I think first we have to change the perception from faculty members' perspective. I feel comfortable with the traditional in-classroom setting. Of course, it gives a lot of good merit in classroom settings by interacting with students, but we have to cope with this COVID-19 pandemic, and also this will continue even if we will set free from COVID-19. So the perception, resistance, and reluctance from faculty members would be one way to go. And another one is working together with students, working together with IT companies, working together with governments and international schools, and so on and so forth. I think those are the important aspects for long-distance education should be successful. As far as hardware and software is concerned, AR, VR, 3D printing, AI, big data analytics will help us to get there and transform traditional in-classroom settings into online platform in better ways. But in the meantime, we have to map out what we have and the goal, then how do we get there. And we will start with the easiest task, and then tackle the easiest task, and then move on to the next one, and all the way up to hardest one. And lastly, I think the blending of asynchronous and synchronous solution would be a great help. Not just online settings, but blended settings will be a good solution for the midterm.
Thank you, Professor Song. Professor Pages, would you like to join in?
Yes, I think this is a very interesting question around the platform. I have a few things that I'd like to say about that. First of all, I think that, one of the limitations of learning platforms, and it was very interesting to hear about the progression at Yonsei, because we've been through a similar kind of scale up and acceleration in terms of our learning platform, with many, many hits and lots of pressure trying to keep things running and developing capacity. But one of the difficulties with learning platforms is we shouldn't overestimate the time and the students spend on them, because they use them, but they also use many other tools around them. Good examples of online collaboration with the students show that the students use the learning platform, but they also use WhatsApp, they use other tools. And I think we have to be careful, because these platforms, they develop a very controlled environment. But what's the richness of undergraduate and graduate learning? It's the informal environment, which was said very well in the first presentation. And that informal environment online are all of the other tools, YouTube, the app tools, different ways of communicating, of producing documents which can be evaluated, using mobile phone technology, different ways of communicating around the platform. So one of the risks, I think, when we look at learning platforms is to think of this very controlled environment. And I think that the data return to adaptive personalized learning will be very interesting, but we shouldn't neglect all of the free informal activity that students will engage in around those tools, which really also are very much driving the learning. So I think that's an important point. Another point related to that is the question of critical digital literacy. And this is that when we put our students in these environments, what we're doing is they are learning what we are putting in, what they need to learn, biology, physics, economics, sociology, but they're also how to work on with themselves and with each other. And they need to develop this kind of critical digital literacy. It's a term coined by colleagues that I know, Francesca Helm, Miriam Holk. I can provide the reference, but we shouldn't neglect the different ways of interacting and certain different ways of engaging with others, politeness, recognizing and avoiding misunderstandings. And these are an important part of online interface. So I'm terrible for this, but I always want to bring the human back into online learning. And I think the human is really there. One of the difficulties is that we always tend to put online learning in comparison to our experience as classroom learning, where it's something completely different. And that human organization has to come around it. And we will see how it develops. It's developing very fast now, and we haven't had much time to look at that. But I think, the human element is really important. And I think that will be amazing, that artificial intelligence will give us many opportunities, but we shouldn't overestimate the power of that controlled, organized environment. And we should look at it in the wider context of what people do when they learn.
Thank you, Professor Pages. Thank you, Professor Pages. Vice President Park has been very patient, waiting for a question to come his way.
Okay.
So one of the things that I was surprised to see was among the projects that you supported, there were 4 agriculture projects, and there were 2 medicine projects, and there was one, or was it 2 engineering and 1 medicine? Among the engineering projects was ICT. So this is interesting in light of what you concluded with, in that you are helping the developing countries to leapfrog. And here's the problem: you have you have both sides of the spectrum, from agriculture to ICT. And you are in the process of sort of translating our educational knowledge and systems to the developing countries. And in doing so, you're actually doubling, in some cases, doubling the issues, agriculture with ICT. Now, this will lead to a kind of a heightened acceleration of development. So here's the question. How can COICA work to maximize the benefits of such two-tier developments or acceleration while minimizing the problems that arise from the very acceleration that is happening in education and industry?
Right. I'd like to explain that, two extreme is, well, you might want to say the contradictory, right? In comparison to what I'm saying is a kind of, intending to future prosperity. So I'd like to explain that situation under the term of dual economy. We recognize the so-called dual economy strategy of some developing countries, for example, the Vietnam and some upper middle income countries like Colombia, Peru, and Azerbaijan. Well, their economy developed quite. So they have some resources to allocate in order to solve their social and economic problems like poverty or disparity between the urban and rural cities, and also the income differences between the rich and the poor. They have some resources for doing so, but rather they tend to focus on more futuristic, agenda like science and technology and innovation, leaving, serving those disparities to the aid of the donor countries and institutions. So we know that some countries are adopting that kind of dual economy strategy. So on the one hand, we are identifying a kind of exit strategy for those upper middle income countries because they have some resources. We request them to reallocate some parts of resources to solve those social and economic problems, even though they might have to invest largely for the future competitiveness building. So on one hand, we are trying to exit gradually. It should be a gradual approach. On the other hand, because that exit should not happen in one day or in 1 month, it's a gradual approach. So we feel the necessity of continuing the support toward those vulnerable groups of people like women, disabled, the children. So on the one hand, helping those vulnerable groups to make their way toward the development and the future, and we are requesting our partner countries to allocate some parts of their resources toward those solving social problems. That's the direction we adopt at the moment. But yes, as you mentioned, in terms of ICT and innovation technology, those areas we are talking about the future prosperity, but at the same time we need to support them to develop the agriculture, fisheries, those in the first and second tier industries in order to solve imminent problems they face.
Thank you, Dr. Park. So let's move back to the original question that I asked to all panelists. How to deal with this issue of space. This is going to be critical at every stage of the future of our higher education, actually the future of education itself. So is it not simply the question of how we can make virtual connections as effective as physical connections, but some of the presentations seem to suggest that it may not be such a very simple issue. Perhaps, physical connections may not need to be, replaced even, or virtual connections having values of themselves that physical connections cannot provide. So I would like to just open this question up to anybody who would like to take it. Any takers? Just your, frank opinions, because I don't think we can ever conclude, the session in a, very neat or tidy way. We'll be leaving a bigger mess than we actually came in with. So, just more questions will be fine.
Okay, then can I raise a point?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Even though the KOICA is also adopting extensively the telecommunication modes, we are even providing some volunteer services through electronically, but we are doing so because there's no other option at the moment because of the pandemic situation. But personally, I believe the limitations you mentioned of the long distance communication, well, in some part we can overcome it through some the fine technologies, but eventually in some part we cannot overcome. So Professor He mentioned the selective digital transformation. So I'd like to say that, okay, we can selectively transform those offline communications into long distance communications, but should we say that rather than the selective but a kind of optimized integration of those online and offline activities? So at the moment, because of the pandemic situation, is not over yet. So we are inevitably utilizing those online communication only. But if the situation is under control, not completely normal, but kind of stabilized way, then perhaps we have the way of communicating face to face possible. In that case, isn't it necessary to find an optimized level of integration between those online and offline methods? That seems to be the quite critical the aspect in the future of our activities and even in the education field as well.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's a very good start. Yes, Professor Paches?
Just to, again, I think, because I don't want people to feel that I oppose virtual and physical in that way. I think what will happen, it's very frustrating not to be able to move, and I think we need to encourage students to move, and we need to move ourselves, because we miss the spontaneity and the spontaneous interactions that you have when you go somewhere. The thing with online environments is, even when we bring diverse groups of people together, we've already chosen those people. And there is no kind of bumping into people online in the same way that there is when you go somewhere, which may seem a bit of a simplistic description, but I think it does sum up why it's important to see things on a continuum. I don't think we'll go back to the kind of mobility where we were rushing off to have a meeting on the other side of the world for 2 or 3 days. I think we'll be more careful about that. But the extended immersion in a different country, in a different language, whether it's for educators or international people involved in internationalization or research, or for students, it has a value. Otherwise, we will lose that appreciation of cultural diversity. So I think for me, it's on a continuum. It's not the same thing, but what's interesting is now we have the opportunity to extend and open to people who may not have had the opportunity to have international experience physically. And that's a very nice opportunity for education and research. But I don't think we should imagine that we will not move. We need to move to really understand each other. It'll be rebalanced. That's my fundamental opinion, as someone who really passionately believes in virtual exchange. So.
Thank you very much. The accidental, spontaneous encounters, I think, makes a really strong point. Professor Ha?
So, as I mentioned in the first part of my presentation, so the pandemic, the COVID-19, will provide us two types of things that should be changed and should not be changed while we getting through all this hard time. But throughout that process, I believe in higher education. For example, like online learning will be tested here and there, and we realize that this is cut off for certain types of learning. As I mentioned in like receptive learning and basic principle, maybe it is pretty much, work out with online learning, so that those kind of trends will prevail in the near future after the pandemic is somehow terminated. And I like the term that Mr. Park mentioned, that optimization. I have engineering background, so that I really like that in optimization. But one concern with that optimization is that we universities, all the universities all over the world, mostly all over the world, we're struggling in financial perspective. So my concern is about that optimization process a little bit twisted throughout some administrative decision making. So for example, where this worked out throughout this pandemic, even though that is truly optimization from student achievement and student benefit perspective, but my concern is a little bit, for example, they consider this works okay, while we can save money and it work out in economical manner. So that, for example, as Professor Pajes mentioned about the internationalized education, I really love it. And however, still, I don't believe that it cannot fully replace student exchange program. But administrative, management group, where it worked out, why we have to send out our students to overseas? Let us fully utilize internationalized education in virtual manner. I don't think that is truly optimization. That objective function should be student benefit. But somehow we twist that objective function to financial perspective. That is my concern while we're having this discussion.
Yeah, Yonsei, our goal is not to become Yonsei Cyber University. That's the period. So what we do is we try to maximize what we have and how to provide high quality education for students and new opportunity for anyone who need our education internationally or domestically. So this will be our new journey, just I don't believe that the virtual learning will replace physical learning setting entirely. That's my assessment.
I think we need to move on to the last question, and we don't have that much time remaining, so I would like for our participants to be brief on it. There was a question asked, prior to the opening of our session, and we can only deal with one question here, which was about educational equality and economic parity. Now, this is a question that will, take books and books and maybe whole libraries to answer. I would like to transform this into another question about the value of education, which I was originally going to ask Professor Pajes, but perhaps everybody can chip in, including Dr. Park, because the value of education, from the point of view of COICA, will be perhaps very different from our perspectives. Beginning with, let's go with from the opposite end. Let's begin with Dr. Park.
Of education. Well, the increased capacities, which is specified into the skills and knowledge. Well, that's primarily, yes, we try to enhance in developing countries knowledge and skills. Simply speaking.
Yes. Perhaps also to add to that, it would be the cost of education. So let's we could do as kind of a balancing of the scales. Moving to Professor Song, in the order of the opposite order of presentation.
I think the like leading universities like Yonsei or other top university can help like the small liberal arts college, and who's suffer from the COVID-19 because of lack of hardware and software infrastructure. So previously I said that working together, meaning not only within the Yonsei community, but also between Yonsei and any other small colleges and students from small colleges, we can help them to be educated, high quality with the high quality contents. So by doing so, we can help them somehow. And that's
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to Professor Pages.
Okay, so this is a question about what the value of education is and how we can bring that value out for every student. If I understand you correctly, I think I'm going to back to what esteemed colleague from Koika, Dr. Park, just said when he talked about skills. I think and it's interesting that we can make the resources and the courses available and in between and across boundaries and rebalance between small universities that are suffering and universities which have a very strong international reputation, and like Yonsei, there can be some rebalancing. But fundamentally, what students come to university for are these transversal skills which come from the disciplinary learning. How do we solve complex problems? How can I understand what's happening when I don't understand the people around me because they're very different? How can I address the problems that we don't know today? When I mentioned in Light, I said we had these 5 challenges. None of those challenges is a virus pandemic. But if everything goes well, students who've been through the Enlightened universities, they should have the skills to be reactive, to be mobilized, to solve complex problems. And I think that's really the value of higher education. It doesn't mean that the disciplines are not important, but again, it comes back to the way in which we approach how people learn, how we connect them to high quality education, and how we empower them with these transversal skills. So that's really where you get equity. It's when you're really focusing on what can the students do in unknown situations after they come through our education program. How can they redeploy their skills? For me, that's really fundamental in terms of the value of higher education. And it will help us get through the economic uncertainties that some universities will face in the coming years. It's really developing what the fundamental value of higher education is.
That reminds us of an earlier draft you made, and you made the distinction between instrumental versus emancipatory education.
Yeah.
Emancipatory being perhaps equal to liberal education.
Yeah.
Yes, I think there is value in what you say. Yes, thank you. Lastly, Professor Hall.
Well, it's a very tough question. I believe it's kind of philosophical question. So, and also it has an answer from a variety of different aspects. But I would like to say, give my answer from like the value of higher education, which is about what kind of value that we can really provide to our student. And in fact, all the problems that we are facing right now, particularly for economic parity or economic divide, it comes from somehow the way of kind of education in higher education field. Say, for example, we have been focusing on more on vocational training, more on like kind of specialized training up to now, ever since like maybe 1970, after all. While we talking about all the educational specialists, educational scholars, talking about integrated and holistic learning, but to be honest with you, we educators in higher education institution, we have been focusing on some vocational training mainly. Those kind of trend and those kind of conversion from holistic learning, from vocational learning, change the world somehow. For example, right now, I believe the world right now is abnormal from many perspectives. That somehow comes from the way of teaching and learning in higher education. So that things has to be changed. And from that perspective, I believe more and more holistic learning with, as you mentioned it, as Pazes mentioned, some kind of collaborations and working together, bring more social value to higher education. How to change the world better than before. Those kind of things not really discussed, even in top-tier university like Yonsei University. So that things has to be changed, and then that will be the true value in the near future as a resolution to handle the existing problems, such as like economic parity.
Okay, thank you very much. Some of you might have heard a very high-pitched tone. That tells us that our time is up. So we must conclude. I don't really have many words to say about conclusion, because this is going to be an open-ended question, and as Professor Song has said, we're still in progress. So I hope perhaps next year or the next, we can come together again and talk about what has transpired since our session today. So thank you very much for all our to all our participants. Should we sort of clap to each other? There's only us, but so thank you, and I hope this has been at least thought-provoking to all our viewers, and we will conclude. Thank you. Bye.